The millionaire froze in his marble hallway when his cleaning lady answered her phone in perfect Korean. That single word, "Annyeong," shattered 20 years of carefully constructed silence. Robert Miller had spent 2 decades running from the language of the only woman he'd ever truly loved. Have you ever heard something that instantly brought back a love you thought you'd buried? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Robert stood motionless outside his home office, briefcase still in hand from another successful day, closing deals worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. The Dallas mansion gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, every surface polished to perfection, except for the man who owned it all, standing frozen like a broken statue as foreign words echoed through halls that had never heard anything but English. What would you do if a stranger's voice transported you back to your greatest heartbreak? This is the story of a man who chose wealth over love, and the day that choice came back to haunt him. Stay with me to discover how one conversation in a foreign language can rewrite an entire life. The woman speaking was Monique, his new cleaning lady. 29 years old, from Atlanta, hired through an agency just 3 weeks ago. Until this moment, she'd been invisible to him, another service provider in his carefully organized world of maids, gardeners, and personal assistants. But now her voice carried across his foyer in melodic Korean phrases that made his chest tighten with memories he'd buried in concrete. Yama, Jaljaneo. Yes, Mom. Are you doing well? Robert's knees almost buckled. The briefcase slipped from his fingers, hitting the marble with a sharp crack that echoed through the house. His heart hammered against his ribs, as if trying to escape the cage he'd built around it. 22 years old, standing on a Soul Street corner, holding hands with someone whose face he could still draw from memory. That's where those sounds took him in an instant. Monique continued her conversation, unaware that each word was dismantling a wall her employer had spent decades building. She laughed, a sound like music, and the Korean flowed from her lips as naturally as breathing. Robert pressed his back against the hallway wall, suddenly dizzy. Nobody in Dallas knew his secret. Not his business partners, who mocked him at the country club for being a divorced virgin at 42. Not the women who threw themselves at his money only to hit the invisible barrier he kept around his heart. Not even his ex-wife, who'd left him after 2 years of marriage, frustrated by his inability to let anyone truly close. They all assumed he was just another Texas millionaire with commitment issues. They had no idea that every time he tried to make love to his wife, another woman's face appeared in his mind. A Korean woman named Hannah who'd taught him that love could be a language all its own, and losing her had left him unable to speak it with anyone else. The phone conversation ended. Footsteps approached. Robert scrambled to compose himself, straightening his tie and picking up his briefcase, but his hands trembled like a teenager's. "Mr. Miller?" Monique appeared around the corner, dustcloth in hand, her dark eyes wide with concern. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." The irony of her words almost made him laugh. A ghost. Yes, that's exactly what he'd seen, or rather heard. The ghost of everything he'd lost, speaking through the lips of a woman who cleaned his toilets for $40 a day. "I'm fine," he managed, his voice hoarse. "Just tired from work." But Monique's expression told him she didn't buy it. She had intelligent eyes, the kind that saw through polite lies. For the first time since hiring her, Robert really looked at his cleaning lady. She was beautiful in an understated way. Smooth, dark skin, natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a plain white t-shirt that somehow looked elegant on her frame. "You dropped this," she said, bending to retrieve a business card that had fallen from his briefcase. As she handed it back, their fingers brushed for just a second. The contact sent electricity up Robert's arm, the first time he'd felt anything close to desire in years. He jerked his hand back as if she'd burned him. "Thank you," he whispered. Monique studied his face with those knowing eyes. "Mr. Miller, I couldn't help but notice you seemed affected by my phone conversation. Do you speak Korean?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Robert's mouth went dry. How could he explain that hearing her speak Korean was like having his chest cracked open with a crowbar? That those beautiful sounds represented everything he'd given up to become the man standing in this marble palace? No, elite. I don't speak Korean. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew she didn't believe him. Because Monique was watching him with the same intensity he'd once reserved for multi-million-dollar negotiations. And for reasons he couldn't understand, this woman who was supposed to be invisible had suddenly become the most dangerous person in his carefully controlled world. Have you ever been transported back in time by a single word? Tell me in the comments what sound brings back your most powerful memory. As Monique ended her call and turned to find him staring, she had no idea her next words in English would change both their lives. "Mr. Miller, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Some ghosts stay buried for decades, until the day someone speaks their native tongue. Robert couldn't sleep that night. He paced his master bedroom until 3 in the morning, Monique's Korean words replaying in his head like a song he couldn't turn off. Every syllable had been perfectly pronounced, her accent better than some native speakers he'd known during his time in Seoul. Where'd she learn to speak like that? And why did hearing it feel like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart until it bled? The next morning, Robert did something he'd never done in his adult life. He stayed home from work. He told his assistant he was sick, which wasn't entirely a lie. He felt feverish, off balance, like he was coming down with something that had been dormant for 20 years. Monique arrived at 9 sharp, just like always. Robert watched from his office window as she parked her beat-up Honda Civic next to his collection of luxury cars. The contrast should have reminded him of the distance between their worlds. Instead, it made him curious about hers. He found her in the kitchen, already working. She'd tied her hair up with what looked like chopsticks, and she hummed while she cleaned, a Korean melody that made his stomach flip. "Monique," he said, his voice rougher than intended. She looked up, surprised. "Mr. Miller? I thought you'd left for work already. I'm working from home today." He paused, studying her face. "Yesterday, when you were on the phone, that was Korean you were speaking, wasn't it?" Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. "Yes, it was. I was talking to my mom." "Your mother speaks Korean?" Monique set down her cleaning spray and faced him fully. The kitchen island became a battlefield of unspoken tension. Coffee cooling between them as words in 2 languages, spoken and unspoken, filled the space with electricity neither understood. "No, my mother doesn't speak Korean. I was practicing with a language exchange partner in Seoul." She tilted her head. "Why do you ask?" Robert felt heat rise in his cheeks. How could he explain without revealing everything? I've never heard Korean spoken in my house before." "Have you heard it spoken elsewhere?" The question was casual, but her eyes were sharp. Robert realized he was being interrogated by his own cleaning lady, and somehow he didn't mind. "Once or twice," he said carefully. "Business trips to Asia." It wasn't entirely a lie. He had been to Asia on business, just not the kind she was imagining. "Your pronunciation is excellent," he added, then immediately regretted it. How would he know if he'd only heard Korean once or twice in business settings? Monique's smile was slow and knowing. "Thank you. I studied abroad in Seoul for a semester during college." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. Seoul. She'd been to Seoul. She'd walked the same streets he'd walked, breathed the same air, maybe even visited the same places where he'd fallen in love and had his heart destroyed. "What did you study there?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Translation and interpretation. I was working toward becoming a professional translator before." She gestured around the kitchen. "Before life happened." Robert stared at her. This woman cleaning his house had a college degree in professional language skills. She'd lived in Korea, spoke the language fluently, and was working as domestic help because life happened. What kind of life forces someone with her qualifications to clean toilets? "What happened?" he asked before he could stop himself. Monique's expression shuddered slightly. "Student loans. My mom got sick." The usual story of dreams deferred for reality. There was pain behind her casual tone, and Robert recognized it because he carried the same kind of pain. Different circumstances, same result. Dreams abandoned for survival. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. Don't be. I'm good at what I do now. And your house is beautiful. She picked up her cleaning supplies. Besides, you never know where life will take you. Maybe someday I'll get back to translation work. Maybe you will, Robert said softly. As she moved past him toward the living room, her shoulder brushed his arm. The contact was innocent, accidental, but it sent fire through his entire body. He hadn't been touched by a woman, really touched, with intention or desire, in over 3 years. Not since his divorce became final, and he'd given up pretending he could feel anything for anyone. But this accidental brush against Monique's shoulder woke something in him that had been sleeping so long he'd thought it was dead. Mr. Miller? Monique's voice came from the doorway. She was looking at him with concern again. Are you sure you're feeling all right? You seem distracted. Robert met her eyes and saw something there he hadn't expected. Interest. Not the calculated interest of women who wanted his money, but genuine curiosity about him as a person. What assumptions do you make about people before you really know them? Share a time you were completely wrong about someone. Monique, he said, then stopped. What was he doing? She was his employee. She was 29 to his 42. She was black, he was white, and they lived in Texas where people still notice such things. She cleaned his house for $40 a day, and he owned half the commercial real estate in Dallas. But none of that mattered when she looked at him like she was seeing something worth seeing. Have you ever been to Korea? She asked suddenly. The silence stretched so long she thought he hadn't heard. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with landmines. Robert's chest tightened. His hands clenched at his sides. 20 years of carefully constructed lies balanced on the edge of his tongue. Finally, he whispered, once. I was a different person then. The pain in his voice made her forget she was just the help. Made her forget the distance between their worlds. Made her step closer instead of walking away. What happened to that person? She asked softly. Robert looked into her eyes and saw something that terrified him more than any business deal or financial risk he'd ever taken. He saw someone who might actually understand. 20 years of silence shattered because a cleaning lady asked the right question at the wrong time. Robert led Monique into his study without thinking, drawn by something in her voice that made confession feel possible. The study walls lined with business awards and diplomas seemed to mock him as he prepared to speak of Korea. All his American success meaningless against the weight of one foreign memory. I wasn't there for business, he said, closing the door behind them. I was 22. Military exchange program. Monique settled into the leather chair across from his desk, her cleaning supplies forgotten in the kitchen. She listened with the focused attention of someone who understood that some stories could only be told once. The program was supposed to last 18 months. I was there to learn about international military cooperation, strengthen ties between allied forces. Robert laughed bitterly. I learned about cooperation, all right, just not the kind they had in mind. He moved to the window, overlooking his perfectly manicured lawn. Even now, 20 years later, he could smell Seoul in spring. Cherry blossoms and street food, car exhaust and possibility. Her name was Hannah, he said, the words feeling rusty in his mouth. She worked as a translator for the base. We met during my first week there. Monique leaned forward slightly. What was she like? Beautiful. Brilliant. She spoke 4 languages fluently and was working on her master's degree in international relations. She wanted to work for the United Nations someday, help build bridges between cultures. Robert's voice softened. She saw the world as something that could be fixed if people just learned to understand each other. Sounds like she was ahead of her time. She was ahead of everything, including me. Robert turned from the window to face Monique. I fell in love with her the day we met. Not the slow, gradual kind of love, the kind that hits you like lightning and changes your molecular structure. Monique nodded as if she understood exactly what he meant. We had to keep it secret, Robert continued. Military regulations, cultural expectations, her family's traditional views about Korean women dating American soldiers. But for 8 months, we built our own world in stolen moments. His voice took on a dreamy quality as the memories flooded back. She taught me Korean. Not just the words, but the heart of the language. The way respect and affection live in different verb endings. How you can say I love you 50 different ways depending on the depth of feeling you want to express. What happened? Monique asked gently. Robert's expression darkened. Her father found out. He was a traditional man who believed foreign relationships brought shame to Korean families. He gave her an ultimatum: in it with me or be cut off from her family forever. What did she choose? She chose me. The words came out broken. She chose me, and it destroyed her life. Robert returned to his desk, pulling open the bottom drawer. From beneath old business documents, he withdrew a small wooden box. With shaking hands, he opened it to reveal a single photograph. A young Korean woman with kind eyes and a smile that could power cities. Monique gasped softly. She's beautiful. She was everything. Robert stared at the photo like it might come to life. When her father cut her off, she lost her family, her support system, her cultural identity. I was all she had left, and I wasn't enough. Why not? Because I was 22 and terrified. Because when my commanding officer found out about the relationship, he threatened to end my military career and send me home in disgrace. Because I had to choose between love and the future my family expected for me. His voice cracked. I chose wrong. Monique reached across the desk and touched his hand. The contact was gentle, meant to comfort, but it sent electricity through Robert's entire body. He pulled back as if burned. I came back to the States and tried to forget her, he said. Threw myself into building my real estate empire. Married the first woman who seemed suitable. Built this life that looks successful from the outside. But you never forgot her. How could I? Robert closed the photo box with a sharp snap. Some people leave pieces of themselves in foreign countries. I left everything that mattered. The room fell silent except for the tick of an antique clock. Monique studied Robert's face, seeing him clearly for the first time since she'd started working for him. The wealthy, cold businessman was gone, replaced by a man still bleeding from a wound inflicted decades ago. What happened to Hannah? She asked quietly. Robert's shoulders sagged. I don't know. I never tried to find out. I was too much a coward. And your marriage? Lasted 2 years. My wife knew I was holding something back, but she didn't know what. How could I explain that I'd left my heart and soul? That every time she touched me, I was thinking of someone else? He laughed bitterly. She called me emotionally unavailable. She was right. Monique was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear. Mr. Miller, in Korean, we have a word, It means missing someone so deeply it becomes part of who you are. I think you know that feeling. Robert's head snapped up. She pronounced the word perfectly, with the exact inflection Hannah had used when she'd taught him the same word during one of their last conversations. Have you ever felt like you left the best part of yourself somewhere you can never return to? Tell me about the place that changed you. How do you know that word? He whispered. Monique smiled sadly. Because I felt it too. Maybe not for a person, but for a dream I had to abandon. We all have our soul, Mr. Miller. As she prepared to leave, gathering her forgotten cleaning supplies, Robert felt something shift inside his chest. For 20 years, he'd carried his secret alone. Now, for the first time, someone else knew the truth about why he'd never learned to love again. Monique, he called as she reached the door. She turned back, and he saw something in her eyes that made his heart race. Not pity, but understanding. Maybe even acceptance. Thank you, he said, for listening. Thank you for trusting me with it. After she left, Robert sat alone in his study, staring at Hannah's photograph. For the first time in 20 years, the weight of his secret felt lighter. And for the first time since Seoul, he wondered if it might be possible to feel something real for another woman. He was right, and that terrified him. She came to clean his house, but ended up cleaning out wounds he'd hidden from the world. Robert spent the weekend thinking about Monique's hands. Not in a crude way, though desire was certainly part of it, but in the way her fingers had touched his when she'd comforted him. Gentle but sure, offering connection without taking anything in return. He couldn't remember the last time someone had touched him with genuine care. Monday morning brought rain to Dallas, the kind of steady downpour that made the city feel smaller and more intimate. Robert found himself pacing his office, checking his watch every few minutes, waiting for 9 o'clock like a teenager waiting for a phone call. When Monique arrived, she was soaked. Her usual composed appearance was replaced by dripping hair and a white t-shirt that clung to curves Robert had never allowed himself to notice before. She stood in his foyer, apologetic and shivering. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. My car wouldn't start, and the bus was late and—" "Stop," he interrupted, grabbing a towel from the guest bathroom. "You're freezing." He wrapped the towel around her shoulders, his hands lingering longer than necessary. This close, he could smell her shampoo, something clean and simple that made him think of fresh starts. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him through wet lashes. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither had acknowledged yet. Robert's hands were still on the towel, still on her shoulders, and he realized with a start that he didn't want to let go. "I should get changed," Monique said softly, but she didn't move away. "I have a guest room upstairs," Robert heard himself offer. "There might be something dry you could wear." It was improper. She was his employee. But the way she was looking at him, like he was a man worth looking at, made him forget every boundary he'd ever set. 20 minutes later, Monique came downstairs wearing one of his old college sweatshirts and a pair of sweatpants she'd rolled up at the ankles. The clothes swallowed her small frame, but somehow she looked more beautiful than she had in any outfit he'd seen her wear. "Better?" she asked, giving him a small smile. "Much." His voice came out rougher than intended. They stood in the kitchen, the morning's work forgotten. Rain drummed against the windows, creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. Robert found himself moving closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. "Mr. Miller," Monique said, and there was something different in her voice. Less formal, more personal. "Robert," he corrected. "When it's just us, call me Robert." "Robert." The way she said his name made something warm unfurl in his chest. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. "After you told me about Hannah, do you regret it? Sharing that with me?" Robert considered the question seriously. For 3 days, he'd worried he'd revealed too much, crossed too many professional lines. But looking at Monique now, seeing the genuine concern in her eyes, he realized his only regret was that it had taken so long. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret it." "Good." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see gold flecks in her brown eyes. "Because I've been thinking about what you said, and I have something to tell you, too." Robert's heart started racing. "What?" "My mother didn't get sick," Monique said quietly. "I mean, she did, but that's not why I'm here. Cleaning houses, I mean." "I don't understand." Monique took a deep breath. "I was engaged to a man I met in Seoul. He was American, working for an international company there. We planned to get married, start a translation business together when we came back to the States." Robert felt an unexpected stab of jealousy. "What happened?" He changed his mind. Decided a black woman from Atlanta didn't fit the image he wanted for his corporate wife. Her voice was steady, but Robert could hear the hurt underneath. "He left me there. I had to find my own way home, with no job lined up, no savings, and no one to blame but myself for believing someone could love me enough to build a life with me." "Monique, I'm not telling you this for sympathy," she said quickly. "I'm telling you because you shared something real with me, and I wanted to do the same. We both know what it feels like to have love disappoint us." Robert reached out without thinking, cupping her face in his hand. Her skin was soft and warm, and when she leaned in his touch, he felt something crack open inside his chest. "He was an idiot," Robert said fiercely. "Anyone who could walk away from you is a complete idiot." Monique's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You barely know me. I know enough." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I know you're brilliant and brave and beautiful. I know you speak Korean better than most people who grew up there. I know you make me feel things I thought were dead." The confession hung in the air between them. Robert realized what he'd just admitted, but instead of taking it back, he moved closer. "Robert," Monique whispered. "This is crazy," he said, but his other hand found her waist, pulling her against him. "Completely crazy," she agreed, rising on her toes to meet him halfway. When their lips touched, it was soft at first, tentative questioning. But when Monique's arms wound around his neck, when she pressed closer and opened her mouth under his. The kiss deepened into something hungry and desperate. Robert had kissed other women since Hannah, but they'd all been shadows, echoes of real feeling. This was fire. This was resurrection. This was the first time in 20 years he'd kissed someone and felt fully present in his own body. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This complicates things," Monique said, but she didn't step away. "Everything worthwhile is complicated," Robert replied, resting his forehead against hers. "Have you ever felt a connection so strong it scared you? Tell me in the comments about a time when someone made you feel truly seen." Thunder crashed outside, reminding them both that the world existed beyond this kitchen, beyond this moment. But as Monique smiled up at him, her hands still fisted in his shirt, Robert realized that for the first time in decades, he didn't want to hide from the world. He wanted to face it with her. When lightning strikes twice, you learn that some storms are worth getting caught in. The kiss changed everything and nothing. Robert went to work the next day, trying to pretend his world hadn't shifted on its axis, but every meeting felt meaningless, every phone call a waste of time. All he could think about was the way Monique had felt in his arms, the soft sound she'd made when he'd deepened the kiss, the way she'd looked at him afterward like she was seeing him for the first time. By Wednesday, he was a mess. He caught himself checking his watch constantly, counting down the hours until Monique would arrive. His assistant asked twice if he was feeling well. His business partner joked that he seemed distracted by a woman, which was closer to the truth than Robert was comfortable with. When Thursday morning came, Robert made a decision that would have shocked everyone who knew him. He canceled his afternoon meetings and came home early. He found Monique in his bedroom, changing the sheets on his king-size bed. She was humming again, that same Korean melody that had first caught his attention. When she saw him in the doorway, she jumped slightly. "Robert, I thought you were working late today. I was supposed to be." He leaned against the doorframe, drinking in the sight of her. She was wearing jeans and a fitted blue t-shirt that brought out the warmth in her skin. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she had a small smudge of dust on her cheek that made him want to reach out and wipe it away. "Is everything okay?" she asked, studying his face with those perceptive eyes. "I couldn't concentrate," he admitted. "I kept thinking about Monday." Monique's hands stilled on the fitted sheet she'd been adjusting. The kiss. "The kiss," he confirmed. They stared at each other across his bedroom, the air thick with unspoken desire. Robert had been fighting this feeling all week, telling himself it was inappropriate, impossible, insane. But standing here now, watching the way Monique's chest rose and fell with her quickened breathing, he realized he was tired of fighting. "Robert," she said softly, and the way she spoke his name was like a match to gasoline. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, backing her against the wall beside his bed. His hands braced on either side of her head as he leaned down, close enough to feel her breath on his lips. "Tell me to stop," he said roughly. Instead of answering with words, Monique reached up and pulled his mouth down to hers. This kiss was different from the first, hungrier, more demanding. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Robert groaned against her lips. "I've been thinking about this all week," she confessed between kisses. "So have I." His mouth moved to her neck, finding the spot that made her gasp. "I think I'm losing my mind." "Good," she breathed, her fingers working at the buttons of his shirt. "I'd hate to be crazy alone." Robert pulled back to look at her, his hands cupping her face. "Monique, I need you to understand something. I haven't, since my divorce, there hasn't been anyone who mattered." Her expression softened. "I know. I can see it in the way you touch me. Like you're afraid I'll disappear. Aren't you?" Instead of answering, she finished unbuttoning his shirt, her palms sliding over his chest. Robert's breath caught. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched with desire instead of obligation. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, meeting his eyes. "Not unless you want me to." "I don't." The words came out fierce, possessive. "God help me. I don't want you to go anywhere." He kissed her again, pouring 20 years of loneliness into the contact. Monique responded with equal fervor, her body pressing against his like she was trying to crawl inside his skin. When her hands moved to his belt, Robert caught her wrists. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice hoarse with want. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she replied. What followed was unlike anything Robert had ever experienced. With his ex-wife, physical intimacy had been duty, performance, going through the motions while his mind was elsewhere. With Monique, every touch was electric, every kiss a revelation. She responded to him like her body had been created specifically for his hands, and when she cried out his name, it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. Afterward, they lay tangled in his Egyptian cotton sheets, Monique's head on his chest, his fingers threading through her hair. Robert stared at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. "Regrets?" Monique asked softly, as if she could read his thoughts. "Just one," he said, and felt her tense. "I regret waiting this long." She lifted her head to look at him, smiling that radiant smile that made his chest tight. "We're both here now. That's what matters." Robert traced the curve of her cheek with his finger. "Monique, this is complicated, doesn't begin to cover it." "I know." She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "You're my employer. You're white and rich and powerful, and I'm your black cleaning lady from Atlanta. People will have opinions." "Screw people's opinions," Robert said fiercely. "Easy for you to say. You've never been judged for your choices the way I have." The words were quiet but pointed, and they made Robert pause. She was right. He'd lived his entire life with privilege, economic, racial, gender-based. He'd never had to consider how the world would view his relationships through the lens of race and class. "You're right," he said finally. "I can't pretend to understand what this might cost you. But I can promise you this. Anyone who has a problem with us will have to go through me first." Monique studied his face, looking for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she smiled and settled back against his chest. "So what happens now?" she asked. Robert's arms tightened around her. For the first time in 20 years, he had something worth protecting, someone worth fighting for. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like coming alive. Have you ever taken a risk that changed everything? Share in the comments about a moment when you chose courage over fear. "Now," he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, "we figure out how to build something real together." Outside, storm clouds gathered over Dallas, promising another night of rain. But inside Robert's bedroom, wrapped in Monique's warmth, he wasn't afraid of storms anymore. Some tempests, he'd learned, were worth weathering. The thunder that followed would test everything they'd just discovered. The hardest part about falling in love isn't the falling. It's explaining the bruises to people who weren't there to see you jump. Robert woke up Friday morning with Monique in his arms and panic in his chest. Sunlight streamed through his bedroom windows, highlighting her peaceful face against his white pillowcase. She looked like she belonged there, which was exactly the problem. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Text message from his business partner, James. "Lunch today at the club. Bringing potential investors. Don't be late. The Dallas Country Club, where old white men with old money gathered to make deals and judge everyone who didn't look exactly like them. The same place where Robert had been mocked for years about his failed marriage and non-existent dating life. The thought of facing those men while still carrying Monique's scent on his skin made his stomach turn. "You're thinking too loud," Monique murmured against his chest, her voice thick with sleep. "Sorry." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Work stuff." She lifted her head, studying his face with those knowing eyes. "What kind of work stuff makes you look like you're about to throw up?" Robert hesitated. How could he explain the world he moved in without sounding like a complete ass? How could he tell her that his success depended on the approval of men who would never see her as anything more than the help? "I have a lunch meeting," he said carefully. "Important client." Monique sat up, the sheet falling to her waist. Her bare shoulders caught the morning light, and Robert had to force himself to focus on her words instead of the curve of her neck. "And you're worried about what they'll think if they find out about us," she said. It wasn't a question. "Monique, it's okay." She climbed out of bed, unself-conscious in her nakedness. "I knew what this was when it started." "What do you mean what this was?" She pulled on her clothes from the day before, her movements efficient but cold. A rich white man sleeping with his black maid. Tale as old as time. I just forgot for a minute that fairy tales aren't real. Her words hit Robert like a slap. That's not what this is. Isn't it? Monique turned to face him, fully dressed now, while he was still naked under the sheets. The power dynamic felt intentional. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what it is. Robert jumped out of bed, pulling on his pants. You think I'm ashamed of you? I think you're terrified of what your country club friends will say when they find out you're sleeping with a woman who cleans your toilets. The crude way she said it made him flinch, which was apparently the reaction she'd been looking for. Her expression hardened. There it is, she said quietly. The flinch. The moment you realize how this looks from the outside. That's not. Robert ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. These people control millions of dollars in investments. My reputation affects hundreds of employees. Your reputation? Monique nodded slowly. Right. Can't have people thinking Robert Miller actually cares about someone beneath his social class. Stop putting words in my mouth. I'm not putting anything anywhere. I'm just seeing clearly for the first time since you kissed me. She grabbed her purse from the chair. I should go. Monique, wait. Robert caught her arm as she headed for the door. This isn't over. Yes, it is. She looked down at his hand on her arm until he released her. Because I won't be someone's dirty secret. I've been that person before, and I swore I'd never do it again. You're not a dirty secret. Then prove it. She met his eyes, challenging. Take me to lunch with your investors today. The request landed between them like a live grenade. Robert's mouth opened and closed without sound. The thought of walking into the Dallas Country Club with Monique on his arm made his palms sweat. Not because he was ashamed of her, but because he knew exactly how those men would treat her, what they would say, how they would look at her. I can't, he said finally. Something died in Monique's eyes. Then we're done here. She left without another word, and Robert let her go because he was a coward who chose reputation over love for the second time in his life. The country club lunch was torture. Robert sat through 2 hours of handshakes and small talk, his mind replaying Monique's words on repeat. When James asked about his love life, making the same tired jokes about Robert's string of failed relationships, Robert wanted to throw his drink in the man's face. Maybe you should try dating down, suggested Harold, a 70-year-old oil executive with more money than sense. Get yourself a nice little secretary or something. Someone grateful. The other men laughed. Robert felt sick. Women today want too much, added another investor. Equality, respect, all that nonsense. Sometimes a man needs someone who knows her place. Robert excused himself to the bathroom and threw up his expensive lunch. By the time he got home that evening, Monique's car was gone from his driveway. He found a note on his kitchen counter, written in her careful handwriting. Mr. Miller, I've taken a position with another family. Please send my final check to the address below. Thank you for the opportunity. M. The formality of it cut deeper than anger would have. She'd gone back to calling him Mr. Miller, erasing everything they'd shared with professional politeness. Have you ever chosen safety over love? Tell me in the comments about a time when fear made you lose something precious. Robert crumpled the note in his fist, but it was too late. He'd made his choice at the country club, just like he'd made his choice 20 years ago in Seoul. He'd picked his comfortable, respectable life over the woman who could have made him happy. Some patterns, he realized, were harder to break than others. But as he stood alone in his empty mansion, surrounded by all his success and achievements, Robert wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. The answer came to him 3 days later, when he couldn't get out of bed because the silence in his house felt like death. Pride is the most expensive thing you'll ever own, and the hardest thing you'll ever give up. Robert spent the weekend drunk. Not falling down, embarrassing drunk, but the kind of steady, methodical drinking designed to numb everything from his chest down. He called in sick to work Monday, which he'd never done in his adult life. Tuesday, he showed up but couldn't focus on a single contract or phone call. By Wednesday, his assistant was threatening to call a doctor. You look terrible, James said, barging into Robert's office without knocking. What's wrong with you? Robert stared at his business partner through bloodshot eyes. James was everything Robert used to think he wanted to be. Confident, successful, unmarried by choice, and completely unburdened by messy emotions like love or conscience. Nothing's wrong, Robert lied. Bullshit. You've been walking around here like someone died. Did someone die? In a way, yes. Robert had killed whatever chance he'd had of happiness, just like he'd done in Seoul. The pattern was so clear now, it made him laugh, which came out sounding more like a sob. Robert, you're scaring me. James sat down, his expression shifting to genuine concern. Talk to me. I met someone, Robert said finally. A woman? That's great. When do I get to meet her? You don't. Robert poured himself another whiskey from the bottle he'd started keeping in his desk drawer. It's over. What happened? Did she want your money? No. Robert laughed bitterly. She wanted my respect. Turns out that was asking too much. James frowned. I don't understand. Of course he didn't. James lived in the same bubble Robert had been trapped in for 20 years. A world where women were accessories, where love was a luxury for people who couldn't afford better things, where reputation mattered more than happiness. Forget it, Robert said. Just forget I said anything. But James wouldn't let it go. Over the next hour, he pulled the story out of Robert piece by piece. Not the whole truth. Robert wasn't drunk enough to mention Monique's race or her job, but enough to get James's opinion. So let me get this straight, James said when Robert finished his sanitized version. You met this woman, fell for her, slept with her, then refused to introduce her to your friends? It's more complicated than that. Is it? Because from here, it sounds like you're embarrassed by her. The words hit too close to home. I'm not embarrassed by her. I'm trying to protect her. From what? From people like us, Robert said quietly. James stared at him for a long moment. Robert, what aren't you telling me? Before Robert could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID made his heart stop. Atlanta General Hospital. Mr. Miller? This is Dr. Chun from Atlanta General. We have a patient here who listed you as an emergency contact. Monique Williams. Robert's blood turned to ice. Is she okay? She was in a car accident this morning. She's stable, but she's asking for you. Robert was out the door before the doctor finished talking. The 5-hour drive to Atlanta passed in a blur of speed limits ignored and prayers to a God Robert hadn't spoken to in years. He'd never driven so fast or cared so little about his own safety. All that mattered was getting to Monique. He found her in the ICU, looking small and fragile in the hospital bed. Her left arm was in a cast, her face bruised, but her eyes were alert when she saw him. You came, she whispered. Of course I came. Robert pulled a chair close to her bed, afraid to touch her in case he hurt something. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. She tried to smile, but winced. Turns out it was just a drunk driver running a red light. The doctor said you listed me as your emergency contact. I know it was stupid. We're not. I mean, after what happened. She trailed off, looking embarrassed. Monique. Robert finally found the courage to take her uninjured hand. I'm an idiot. I know, she said simply. I mean it. I'm an idiot and a coward, and I don't deserve you. His voice cracked. But I need you to know something. Well, I got that call when I thought you might be. He couldn't finish the sentence. Robert, I drove here doing 90 miles an hour because the thought of losing you made me want to die. The words poured out of him like a dam breaking. I don't care what my friends think. I don't care what it costs me. I care about you. Monique studied his face. Do you? Or do you just feel guilty because I got hurt? I felt guilty every day since you walked out of my house, Robert said. Not because you got hurt, but because I hurt you. Because I chose my reputation over your dignity, just like I did 20 years ago with someone else I loved. Someone else? Robert told her about Hannah then, the full story this time. How he'd chosen career over love, safety over passion, approval over happiness. How he'd spent 20 years paying the price for that choice. I won't make the same mistake twice, he said when he finished. I can't. Monique was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. If we do this, really do this, it has to be different. No hiding. No sham. No pretending I'm something I'm not to make your friends comfortable. Okay. I mean it, Robert. I won't be your secret. I know. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I want to take you to dinner at the most expensive restaurant in Dallas. I want to hold your hand at charity galas. I want everyone to know that I'm yours. Tears filled Monique's eyes. What about your investors? Your business? If they can't accept the woman I love, then I'll find new investors. The words surprised him with their certainty. I've built one fortune. I can build another. Have you ever realized that what you thought would destroy you actually set you free? Share in the comments about a time when taking a risk paid off. Monique squeezed his hand. The woman you love? The woman I love, Robert confirmed. If she'll have me. If she can forgive me for being an ass. I might be able to work with that, she said, smiling through her tears. As Robert sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand and planning their future, he realized something that should have been obvious years ago. Love wasn't something you fit into your life around the edges. Love was the thing you built your life around. Everything else was just details. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth in front of people who don't want to hear it. Monique spent 4 days in the hospital, and Robert never left her side. He slept in the uncomfortable chair next to her bed, ate cafeteria food, and fielded increasingly frantic calls from his office. When James flew down to Atlanta to drag him back to Dallas, Robert met him in the hospital lobby and told him the whole truth. "Your cleaning lady?" James stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're throwing away your career for your cleaning lady?" "I'm not throwing anything away," Robert said calmly. "I'm choosing what matters. She's black, Robert, and poor. Do you understand what this will do to your reputation? Do you understand that I don't care?" James spent an hour trying to talk sense into him, listing all the reasons why the relationship was impossible, impractical, career suicide. Robert listened patiently, then said the words that ended their partnership. "If you can't support this, then we have nothing more to discuss." "You're serious," James said, finally realizing this wasn't a phase or a midlife crisis. "Dead serious." "Then you're a fool." "Maybe," Robert agreed. "But I'd rather be a fool in love than a success who dies alone." When Monique was released from the hospital, Robert drove her back to Dallas in his Mercedes. She'd protested. Her apartment in Atlanta was perfectly fine. She had friends there, a life there, but Robert had an answer for every objection. "I want you with me," he said simply. "Not as my employee, as my partner." "Your partner in what?" "Everything." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Monique stared out the window at the Georgia landscape rolling past, processing what he was offering. "Robert, I need to be clear about something," she said finally. "I won't be a kept woman. I need my own work, my own money, my own identity. What if I told you I have an idea about that?" She turned to look at him. "What kind of idea?" "What if we started a translation and cultural consulting business together? You have the language skills, I have the business connections and startup capital. We could help companies navigate international markets, provide translation services, cultural training." Monique's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I've been thinking about it since you told me about your dreams. Why should your skills go to waste cleaning houses when you could be building bridges between cultures? That would be incredible." She paused. "But are you sure? Starting a business together is a big step. Monique, I want to build a life with you. A real life, where we're equals in every way that matters. This feels like a good place to start." The smile that spread across her face was worth every risk he was taking. They moved into Robert's Dallas mansion together, and within a week, the rumors started. Robert's staff whispered about the cleaning lady who was now sleeping in the master bedroom. His neighbors noticed the black woman coming and going like she belonged there. His business contacts began asking subtle questions about his new friend. The first test came sooner than expected. Margaret Whitfield, Dallas's most prominent social hostess, called to invite Robert to her annual charity gala. "You can bring a date, of course," she said in her practice society voice. "Anyone special in your life these days?" "Actually, yes." Robert looked across his office to where Monique was reading contracts for their new business, wearing one of his button-down shirts and looking more beautiful than any woman had a right to. "Her name is Monique Williams. She'll be accompanying me." The pause on the other end of the line stretched so long Robert thought the call had dropped. "Monique Williams," Margaret repeated carefully. "And she is the woman I'm in love with." "I see. Well, I look forward to meeting her. But Robert heard the frost in Margaret's voice, and he knew the real test was yet to come. The night of the gala, Monique stood in front of Robert's full-length mirror, adjusting the neckline of the black cocktail dress they'd chosen together. She looked stunning, but Robert could see the nervousness in her posture. "Second thoughts?" he asked, stepping behind her to zip up the dress. "Third and fourth thoughts," she admitted. "These people are going to hate me." "Some of them will," Robert said honestly, "but not all of them. And the ones who matter won't care about anything except who you are as a person. What if there aren't very many of those?" Robert turned her around to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Then we'll find new people. Better people." The gala was held at the Dallas Museum of Art, and from the moment they walked in, Robert felt the weight of every stare. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as they passed. Women in designer gowns whispered behind their champagne glasses. Men in expensive tuxedos looked Monique up and down like they were appraising livestock. "Smile," Robert whispered in her ear. "You're the most beautiful woman in this room, and every man here is jealous that you're with me." Monique straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "Let's do this." They made it exactly 10 minutes before the first confrontation. "Robert Miller," drawled a voice behind them. They turned to find Charles Hampton, old money Dallas royalty, approaching with his wife, Beverly, in tow. "I heard you were bringing someone special tonight." "Charles, Beverly," Robert nodded politely. "I'd like you to meet Monique Williams." Monique extended her hand with a gracious smile. "It's lovely to meet you both." Beverly Hampton looked at Monique's outstretched hand like it might give her a disease. "How interesting," she said without taking it. "And what do you do, Miss Williams?" "I'm starting a translation and consulting business with Robert," Monique replied, her voice steady despite the obvious snub. "How?" "Entrepreneurial," Charles said, the word dripping with condescension. "And before this business venture?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Robert felt his jaw clench, but Monique answered with perfect composure. "I worked in domestic services while building my language skills and cultural expertise. I speak 4 languages fluently and lived abroad in Seoul for several years." "Domestic services," Beverly repeated, making it sound like a communicable disease. How quaint. That was the moment Robert had enough. Have you ever watched someone you love face judgment with dignity? Tell me in the comments about a time when someone's strength inspired you to be braver. "You know what's really quaint, Beverly?" Robert said, his voice carrying enough authority to turn heads throughout their section of the party. Small minds and expensive dresses. The collective gasp was audible. Beverly Hampton's face went pale, then red, then pale again. Charles puffed up like an angry peacock. "I beg your pardon," Beverly sputtered. "No need to beg," Robert replied smoothly. "Just remember that Monique is my partner in every sense of the word. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. I trust that's clear enough." He took Monique's arm and walked away, leaving the Hamptons standing speechless in their wake. As they moved through the crowd, Robert noticed something interesting. Some people looked away uncomfortably, but others nodded approvingly. A few even smiled. "That was—" Monique started. "Long overdue," Robert finished. "I should have done that years ago to different people for different reasons." For the rest of the evening, they faced the crowd together. Some people were cold, others were curious, but a surprising number were genuinely welcoming. By the time they left, Monique had 3 business cards from potential clients and an invitation to join the International Women's Business Network. "So," Robert said as they drove home, "how do you feel about being a public scandal?" "Like I can handle anything," Monique replied, "as long as I don't have to handle it alone." Robert reached over and took her hand. "You'll never have to handle anything alone again." The best partnerships aren't built on what you have in common. They're built on how well your differences make each other stronger. 6 weeks after the charity gala, Robert and Monique's translation business had its first major client. Samsung's American headquarters needed cultural consultants for a new marketing campaign targeting diverse communities, and they'd heard about the unusual partnership between a Dallas real estate mogul and a Korean-speaking cultural expert. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning in Robert's downtown office building. Monique had been nervous for days, going over her presentation materials until she could recite them in her sleep. What if they don't take me seriously? She asked for the 10th time, adjusting her blazer in the elevator mirror. They will, Robert assured her, because you know more about Korean business culture than anyone else in Texas, and your presentation is flawless. But what if they think I'm just your girlfriend playing businesswoman? Robert stopped the elevator between floors and turned to face her. Monique, look at me. She met his eyes reluctantly. You graduated summa cum laude from Emory University with a degree in international relations. You spent a year in Seoul working with government liaisons and corporate executives. You speak Korean, Japanese, Mandarin, and Spanish fluently. You understand cultural nuances that most consultants miss completely. His hands cupped her face gently. You're not my girlfriend playing businesswoman. You're a brilliant businesswoman who happens to be sleeping with her business partner. Despite her nerves, Monique smiled. When you put it like that, I put it like that because it's true. Robert started the elevator again. Now let's go show Samsung what they've been missing. The Samsung executives, 3 Korean men and 1 Korean-American woman, arrived precisely on time. Robert handled the introductions, but from the moment Monique began speaking, it was clear who they'd really come to see. She started her presentation in English, outlining their approach to cultural consulting. But when she switched to Korean to explain a particularly nuanced point about respect hierarchies in business relationships, the entire room changed. The executives leaned forward, suddenly engaged in a way they hadn't been with Robert's financial projections and timeline charts. For 20 minutes, Monique conducted a bilingual presentation that was part business proposal, part cultural anthropology lesson. She explained not just what American consumers wanted, but why they wanted it, how cultural values shaped purchasing decisions, and what messaging would resonate across different communities. When she finished, the lead executive, Mr. Park, spoke to her in rapid Korean. Monique responded fluently, and Robert watched their conversation with fascination. He couldn't understand the words, but he could read the body language: respect, interest, growing excitement. Finally, Mr. Park turned to Robert and switched back to English. Mr. Miller, your partner is remarkable. We would like to offer you an exclusive consulting contract for our Southeast regional campaigns. The contract they offered was worth more than Robert made on most real estate deals. As the Samsung team left, promising to send the paperwork by Friday, Monique sank into her chair looking stunned. Did that really just happen? She asked. That really just happened. Robert grinned. You were incredible. I understood maybe half of what you said, but I could tell you had them from the first sentence. They offer me more money than I've made in the last 3 years combined. They offered us, Robert corrected. We're partners, remember? Monique looked up at him. Are you sure about the 50-50 split? You're providing the office space, the startup capital, the business connections. And you're providing the expertise that just landed us a 6-figure contract. Robert sat on the edge of his desk. Besides, I have more money than I know what to do with. What I didn't have was purpose. You gave me that. Purpose. For 20 years, I've been making money just to make money, building things just to build them. It was empty. He reached for her hand. This feels like something that matters. We're helping companies connect with people they couldn't reach before. We're building bridges. Monique stood and moved to the window overlooking downtown Dallas. You know what's funny? 6 months ago, I was cleaning offices at night and dreaming about getting back into translation work someday. Now I'm sitting in a corner office negotiating contracts with Fortune 500 companies. You were always capable of this, Robert said, joining her at the window. You just needed the opportunity. And someone who believed in me. They stood together looking out at the city, and Robert felt something he hadn't experienced in years: complete contentment. Not the hollow satisfaction of a successful deal or the temporary pleasure of an expensive purchase, but the deep fulfillment of building something meaningful with someone he loved. That evening, they celebrated at home with takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of champagne Robert had been saving for a special occasion. So what's next? Monique asked, curled up against him on the couch. More corporate clients? Government contracts? Whatever you want, Robert said. This is your vision we're building. Our vision, she corrected. I couldn't do this without you. You could, Robert said seriously, but I'm glad you don't have to. Monique was quiet for a moment, swirling the champagne in her glass. Robert, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret it? Giving up the country club crowd, the society parties, the old boys network? Robert considered the question. 6 months ago, those connections had defined his worth. His reputation among Dallas's elite had been everything to him. Now, most of those people either avoided him entirely or treated him with polite coldness. You want to know what I regret? He said finally. What? I regret that it took me 42 years to figure out that their approval wasn't worth having. He tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. I regret the 20 years I wasted being afraid to live authentically. I Rieger. And us? Do you regret the complications we've created? Robert kissed her softly. Monique, you are the best decision I've ever made. Everything else is just noise. Have you ever discovered that losing something you thought you needed actually freed you to find what you really wanted? Share your story in the comments. Later that night, as they lay in bed planning their next business moves, Robert realized that for the first time in his adult life, he was excited about the future. Not because of what he might acquire or achieve, but because of who he would share it with. I love you, he said into the darkness. I love you too, Monique replied, her voice soft with sleep and satisfaction. And for once, Robert believed that love might actually be enough. Sometimes the past shows up at exactly the right moment to remind you how far you've come. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while Robert was reviewing contracts and Monique was preparing for a conference call with potential clients in Los Angeles. The sender's name made Robert's coffee cup slip from his suddenly nerveless fingers. Hannah Kim. For 22 years, that name had lived in the locked box of his memory. Now it glowed on his computer screen like an accusation, like an answered prayer, like a ghost made digital. Robert. Monique looked up from her notes, concerned. What's wrong? You look like you've seen. A ghost, he finished quietly. Yeah. He turned his laptop screen toward her. Monique read the name, and understanding dawned in her eyes. She knew the story, knew what that name meant to him. Are you going to open it? She asked. Robert's cursor hovered over the email. Part of him wanted to delete it unread, to let the past stay buried. Another part, the part that had never stopped wondering, needed to know. Together, he asked. Monique moved her chair closer to his. Together. Robert opened the email. Dear Robert, I hope this message finds you well. I know it must be surprising to hear from me after so many years. I found your email address through your business website. Congratulations on your success. I am writing because I will be in Dallas next week for a medical conference at UT Southwestern. I am a pediatric surgeon now, working at Seoul National University Hospital. I was hoping we might meet for coffee, if you're comfortable with that. There are things I should have said 22 years ago that I would like the chance to say now. I understand if you would prefer not to meet. I know I have no right to contact you after all this time. But if you are willing, I would be grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. With respect, an old friendship, Hannah. P.S. I saw the article about your new business partnership in the Dallas Business Journal. Your partner seems remarkable. I hope you're happy. Robert stared at the screen, processing words he'd never thought he'd read. Hannah was a doctor now, successful and accomplished. She'd seen the article about his business with Monique, which meant she knew about their relationship. And she hoped he was happy. How do you feel? Monique asked carefully. I don't know. Robert ran his hands through his hair. Confused. Nervous. Curious. He looked at her. How do you feel about it? Honestly? A little jealous. A little curious. Mostly concerned about you. She took his hand. This is the woman you never got over, Robert. The one who made it impossible for you to love anyone else for 20 years. Until you, he said firmly. Until me, she agreed. But she's still a big part of your story. If you want to see her, I understand. Do you? Really? Monique was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I think there's a difference between the love you had for her and the love you have for me. What you had with Hannah was beautiful but unfinished. It became something larger than life because you never got closure. What we have is real, daily, built on who we actually are instead of who we imagine we could be together. You're not threatened by her? I'm confident enough in us to let you face your past, Monique said. Besides, I'm curious about the woman who shaped you so profoundly. If she hadn't broken your heart, you might have married someone else years ago and never been available when I walked into your life. Robert stared at her in amazement. How are you this secure, this wise? Because I know you love me. Not the memory of someone you used to love, but me. The real me, right here, right now. She kissed his cheek. Go have coffee with her. Get your answers. Make your peace. Robert replied to Hannah's email that afternoon, suggesting they meet at a quiet cafe near the medical center. The rest of the week passed in a blur of nervous energy and distraction. By Friday morning, Robert felt like a teenager preparing for his first date. You're sure about this? He asked Monique for the 10th time as he adjusted his tie. I'm sure. She straightened his collar. Just remember, you're not the same person who left Seoul 22 years ago. Don't let her treat you like you are. The cafe was nearly empty when Robert arrived 15 minutes early. He chose a corner table with a view of the entrance and ordered coffee he was too nervous to drink. When the door chimed at exactly 3 o'clock, he looked up and felt his heart stop. Hannah looked older, of course, but gracefully so. Her hair was shorter, styled in a sophisticated bob. She wore a simple black dress and carried herself with the confidence of a woman who'd built her own successful career. When she saw him, her smile was warm but careful. Robert, she said, approaching the table. You look well. So do you. He stood to greet her, unsure of the protocol. A handshake? A hug? In the end, they settled for an awkward air kiss that left them both slightly embarrassed. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Hannah said as they sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either, Robert admitted. But I'm glad I did. You look happy. I am happy. My work is fulfilling. I have good friends, a nice life. She paused. I was married for 8 years. Divorced now, but it was good while it lasted. Children? No. We tried, but... She shrugged. Sometimes things don't work out the way we plan. They made small talk for a few minutes. Her medical career, his business success, changes in Dallas and Seoul. But eventually, they ran out of safe topics. Robert, Hannah said finally, I need to apologize to you. For what? For the way things ended between us. For not fighting harder. For letting my father's disapproval matter more than what we had together. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I was young and scared, and I made choices that hurt us both. Robert felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for 22 years. We were both young and scared. We did the best we could with what we knew then. Did we? Or did we take the easy way out? The question hung between them. Robert considered it seriously. Maybe we took the survivable way out. Maybe we weren't ready for the kind of love that changes everything. And now, Hannah asked, are you ready for that kind of love now? Robert smiled, thinking of Monique waiting at home, probably pacing the living room and pretending not to worry. Yes, I am. Tell me about her, Hannah said. Your partner, Monique. For the next 30 minutes, Robert found himself talking about Monique with the enthusiasm of a man completely in love. He told Hannah about their first meeting, about Monique's intelligence and strength, about how she'd challenged him to be better than he thought possible. She sounds remarkable, Hannah said when he finished. You light up when you talk about her. You do. You do. The way you never lit up when you talked about anything else, even when we were together. Hannah's smile was sad but genuine. I'm happy for you, Robert. Really happy. Are you? Or are you just being polite? Both, maybe. Hannah laughed. But mostly happy. What we had was beautiful, but it was also impossible. We were too different from two different worlds. We would have destroyed each other eventually. You think so? I know so. I tried to recreate what we had with my husband, and it nearly killed us both. You can't build a marriage on nostalgia and what-ifs. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. But you can build one on mutual respect, shared goals, and the decision to choose each other every day. That's what you have with Monique, isn't it? Yes, Robert said, realizing it was true. That's exactly what we have. They talked for another hour, filling in 22 years of gap, sharing stories about their separate journeys. When they finally parted ways, it was with genuine warmth and the kind of closure that only comes from facing the past honestly. Will I see you again? Hannah asked as they stood to leave. I don't think so, Robert said gently. But I'm glad we had this conversation. It means more than you know. Take care of yourself, Robert, and take care of her. Love like that doesn't come along twice. I know, Robert said. That's why I'm not letting it go this time. When Robert got home, he found Monique in their home office, pretending to work while clearly waiting for him. She looked up when he entered, her expression carefully neutral. How did it go? She asked. Instead of answering immediately, Robert crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with 22 years of gratitude for second chances. It went perfectly, he said when they broke apart. She gave me something I didn't know I needed. What? Permission to let go of the past completely. He cupped Monique's face in his hands. And confirmation that what we have is exactly what I want for the rest of my life. Have you ever found closure in an unexpected place? Tell me in the comments about a time when facing your past freed your future. That night, as they lay in bed together, Robert felt lighter than he had in decades. The ghost of his first love had been laid to rest, not through forgetting, but through remembering honestly and choosing differently. I love you, he told Monique, meaning it more completely than he ever had before. I love you too, she replied. All of you, even the parts that loved other people before me. And for the first time in his life, Robert understood what it meant to be wholly known and wholly accepted by another person. It was better than anything he could have imagined. And for the first time in his life, Robert understood what it meant to be wholly known and wholly accepted by another person. It was better than anything he could have imagined. The most dangerous question in any relationship isn't, do you love me? It's what happens next. 8 months after their first Samsung contract, Robert and Monique's business had grown beyond their wildest expectations. They had clients in 12 states, a team of 6 translators, and enough contracts to keep them busy for the next 2 years. Success, it turned out, was easier to handle than Robert had expected. What he hadn't expected was how it would change the question he'd been avoiding since the day Monique moved in with him. Marriage. The word had been dancing around the edges of their conversations for weeks. Friends asked when they were getting engaged. Business partners assumed they were already married. Monique's mother called every Sunday, wanting to know when she could start planning a wedding. But Robert had been married before, and it had been a disaster. The thought of promising forever to someone, even someone he loved as completely as Monique, made his chest tight with old panic. The moment of truth came on a Thursday evening in October. They were working late in their downtown office, reviewing proposals for a major automotive client, when Monique looked up from her laptop and said the words that stopped Robert's heart. I think we should talk about marriage. Robert's pen slipped across the contract he'd been signing. What? Marriage. The thing people do when they love each other and want to build a life together. Monique's voice was calm, but Robert could see the tension in her shoulders. We've been together almost a year, Robert. We live together, work together, sleep together. Everyone already treats us like we're married. The only thing missing is the piece of paper. Is that what you want? A piece of paper? Don't do that, Monique said sharply. Don't reduce marriage to paperwork when you know it means more than that. Robert set down his pen and really looked at her. She was wearing the navy blue dress she'd worn to their Samsung presentation, the one that made her look like she could negotiate peace treaties and run Fortune 500 companies. Her hair was pulled back in a professional bun, but a few strands had escaped to frame her face. She looked tired, successful, beautiful, and completely out of his league. You're right, he said finally. I am sorry. Marriage isn't paperwork. Then what is it? To you, I mean. Robert considered the question seriously. To me, marriage is a promise to stay when things get hard. A commitment to choose each other, even when choosing feels difficult. He paused. It's also the thing that failed spectacularly the last time I tried it. I'm not your ex-wife, Monique said quietly. I know that. Do you? Because sometimes I feel like you're waiting for me to disappoint you the way she did. Like you're holding back part of yourself in case this doesn't work out. The accusation hit too close to home. Robert had thought he was all in with Monique, but maybe she was right. Maybe he was still protecting himself, keeping one foot out the door just in case. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "I want all of you," Monique said. "Not just the parts you feel safe sharing. I want your whole heart, your complete trust, your absolute faith that we can make this work. And if I can't give you that, then we're wasting each other's time." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Robert stared at the woman who had transformed his life, who had made him believe in love again, who had become his partner in every sense that mattered. The thought of losing her made him feel sick. "Monique, I'm not giving you an ultimatum," she said, standing up from her desk. "I'm just being honest. I want to marry you, Robert. I want to have your children and grow old with you and build something that lasts. But I won't beg you to want the same things." She gathered her things and headed for the door. "Think about it. Really think about it. And when you're ready to give me an answer, I'll be waiting." After she left, Robert sat alone in their office, staring at the wall covered with framed articles about their business success. A year ago, he did everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. Now he had everything that mattered and was apparently too scared to protect it. He thought about his first marriage, the polite distance, the careful conversations, the way they'd shared a bed but never really shared their lives. That hadn't been marriage. It had been an extended business arrangement with sex and tax benefits. What he had with Monique was different. She knew about Hannah, about his fears, about his mistakes. She'd seen him at his worst and chose to love him anyway. She challenged him, supported him, made him want to be better than he'd ever thought possible. So why was he hesitating? The answer came to him as he locked up the office and headed home to their empty house. He was hesitating because marriage meant admitting that he needed her. Not just wanted her, but actually needed her to be complete. And needing someone that much was terrifying for a man who'd spent most of his adult life avoiding emotional dependency. But as Robert pulled into his driveway and saw the darkened windows of their home, he realized something important. He already needed her. The question wasn't whether to admit it. The question was whether to celebrate it. He found Monique in their bedroom, reading a book and pretending she wasn't upset. She looked up when he entered, but didn't say anything. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About the fact that I've been an idiot." Robert sat on the edge of the bed. "You're right. I've been holding back, protecting myself, keeping one foot out the door. Not because I don't love you, but because I love you so much it terrifies me." Monique set down her book. "Robert, let me finish." He took her hands in his. "My first marriage failed because we never really saw each other. We played roles, successful businessman, appropriate wife, but we never connected as people. I told myself that meant marriage didn't work for me, that I wasn't built for that kind of commitment. But what we have isn't a role or a performance. It's real. You see me, really see me, and you love me anyway. You challenge me when I'm being stupid, support me when I'm struggling, celebrate with me when things go well. You're not just my girlfriend or my business partner. You're my best friend, my lover, my equal, my future." Tears were starting to form in Monique's eyes. "What are you saying?" Robert slid off the bed and onto one knee beside it. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a ring box he'd been carrying for 3 weeks, waiting for courage. "I'm saying marry me," he said, opening the box to reveal a platinum band with a perfect solitaire diamond. "Not because it's what people expect, not because it makes business sense, but because I can't imagine building a life with anyone else." Monique stared at the ring, then at his face. "You're serious. Dead serious. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to argue with you about business decisions and make up in creative ways. I want to teach our kids Korean and English and how to stand up for what they believe in. I want to grow old with you and still get butterflies when you smile at me. Our kids," Monique whispered, "if you want them, if you want any of this." Robert's voice cracked slightly. "Monique Williams, will you marry me?" She was quiet for so long that Robert started to panic. Then she launched herself off the bed and into his arms, knocking him backward onto the floor. "Yes," she said between kisses. "Yes, yes, yes." As Robert slipped the ring on her finger, he realized that commitment wasn't about losing your freedom. It was about choosing the person you wanted to lose your freedom to. Have you ever been afraid to want something because wanting it made you vulnerable? Tell me in the comments about a time when you chose courage over fear. Later that night, as they lay in bed admiring the way the diamond caught the moonlight, Monique asked the question that would define their next chapter. "So, when do you want to get married?" Robert pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "How about tomorrow?" "Tomorrow?" She laughed. "We can't plan a wedding in one day." "Who said anything about planning?" Robert grinned. "I know a judge. We could be married by noon." "What about our families?" "Our friends? The business associates who'll expect invitations?" "What about them?" Robert's expression grew serious. "Monique, I've spent too much of my life caring what other people think. I don't want to start our marriage by planning it around their expectations." She considered this, tracing patterns on his chest with her finger. "A small ceremony. Just us and the people who really matter." "Just us and the people who really matter," Robert agreed. And for the first time in his life, he knew exactly who those people were. Sometimes the most important. Robert and Monique were married on a Saturday morning in November, exactly 5 days after his proposal. The ceremony took place in the backyard of their Dallas home, officiated by Judge Patricia Chun, a Korean-American woman who'd become a friend through their business connections. The guest list included exactly 12 people. Monique's mother and younger brother who flew in from Atlanta, Robert's sister Sarah who drove down from Oklahoma City, 3 couples who were their closest friends, and 2 employees from their translation company who'd become family. No business associates, no society contacts, no one who'd invited them to parties they'd never wanted to attend. "You sure about this?" asked David, Robert's oldest friend, as they stood on the back patio waiting for Monique to appear. "No big church wedding? No reception at the country club?" "Positive," Robert replied, adjusting his simple gray suit. "This is exactly what we want." It was. The backyard had been transformed with white flowers and string lights, but it still felt like home. Like them. Real and unpretentious and beautiful in its simplicity. When Monique appeared in the doorway, Robert's breath caught. She wore a knee-length ivory dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her hair loose around her shoulders, carrying a small bouquet of white roses. She looked radiant and nervous and completely perfect. "Damn," whispered Marcus, Monique's brother. "My sister cleans up nice." She walked toward Robert without music or fanfare, just the sound of November wind in the trees and the soft murmur of their friend's approval. When she reached him, she was smiling so widely that Robert had to remind himself to breathe. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi yourself," he replied, taking her hands. "You look incredible." "So do you." Judge Chun cleared her throat. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was brief and personal. Instead of traditional vows, Robert and Monique had written their own words to each other. Monique went first, her voice clear and strong. "Robert, a year ago, I thought love was something that happened to other people. People who were luckier, prettier, more deserving than me. You taught me that love isn't about deserving, it's about choosing. Every day, you choose to see the best in me, even when I can't see it myself. You choose to support my dreams, celebrate my successes, and hold me when I fall short. Today, I'm choosing you back for all the days we have left." Robert's throat was tight when his turn came. "Monique, you saved my life. Not dramatically, not heroically, but completely. You saved me from a life of going through the motions, of settling for success instead of happiness, of dying slowly inside a prison of my own making. You speak 4 languages fluently, but the language you taught me, the language of being truly known and truly loved, that's the only one that matters. I promise to spend the rest of our marriage learning to speak it better." When Judge Chun pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was soft and sweet and full of promise. Their friends cheered. Monique's mother cried happy tears, and Robert felt something settle in a place in his chest that he hadn't realized was missing. The reception was held in their living room, with catered barbecue and a playlist of songs that actually meant something to them. There was no wedding cake. Instead, Monique had ordered pie from 3 different bakeries because Robert had mentioned once that he preferred pie to cake. Such a small thing, but it represented everything about their relationship. Paying attention, remembering what mattered, choosing each other's happiness. "So what's the plan now?" asked Sarah, Robert's sister, as they sat together watching Monique dance with her brother to an old Motown song. What do you mean? I mean, you just married a woman 13 years younger than you, started a business together, and scandalized half of Dallas society. What's your encore? Robert laughed. Maybe we'll have kids. Scandalize the other half of Dallas society. You want children? It was the first time anyone had asked him that question directly. During his first marriage, children had been discussed like a business decision. Should they? When should they? What would be the financial impact? With Monique, the idea of children felt different. Natural. Exciting. Yeah, he said, surprising himself with the certainty. I really do. And she does too. Robert watched Monique laughing as Marcus spun her around the living room. We haven't talked specifics, but she comes from a family that believes in love and commitment and building something that lasts. I think she'll be an incredible mother. What about you? Think you'll be an incredible father? That question was harder. Robert had never seen himself as particularly paternal. He'd focused so much on building his career that he'd never developed the nurturing instincts most people associated with parenthood. I think I'll learn, he said finally. Isn't that what love is? Learning to be better than you thought you could be. Sarah smiled. Look at you, getting all philosophical about marriage after one whole hour. Mock me all you want. I'm happy. I can see that. Sarah squeezed his arm. She's good for you, Robert. Really good. Later that evening, after their guests had gone home and the dishes were washed and put away, Robert and Monique sat on their couch, still wearing their wedding clothes, sharing a bottle of champagne and processing the day. So, Monique said, curling up against his side. We're married. We're married, Robert confirmed, still slightly amazed by the fact. Any regrets? Just one. Monique tensed. What? I regret waiting this long to ask you. Robert tilted her chin up so he could see her face. This feels right, Monique. More right than anything I've ever done. Even more right than buying your first building. Even more right than making my first million. Wow, that's serious. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the string lights twinkle in the backyard through their living room windows. Finally, Monique spoke. Robert, can I tell you something? Anything. When I was cleaning your house that first day, when I heard you react to my Korean phone call, I thought you were just another weird rich guy with strange triggers. She laughed softly. I never imagined you'd become the person I'd want to spend my life with. What changed your mind? You did. The way you listened when I told you about my ex-fiancé. The way you supported my business ideas instead of trying to manage them. The way you stood up for me at that charity gala. She traced circles on his chest with her finger. The way you loved me like I was already perfect instead of trying to change me into someone else. You are perfect, Robert said seriously. No, I'm not. But I'm perfect for you, and you're perfect for me. That's different. Better, Robert agreed. As they headed upstairs to their bedroom, now officially their married bedroom, Monique asked the question that would shape their immediate future. So what happens on Monday? Do we go back to work like nothing's changed? Everything's changed, Robert said, pulling her into his arms at the top of the stairs. We're not just business partners anymore. We're not just lovers. We're family. Family, Monique repeated, testing the word. Family, Robert confirmed. You and me against the world. Have you ever had a moment when everything in your life suddenly made sense? Share in the comments about a time when you knew you were exactly where you belonged. That night, as they made love as husband and wife for the first time, Robert realized that all his fears about marriage had been based on the wrong relationship. Marriage to the right person wasn't a trap or a compromise. It was coming home to yourself in someone else's arms. And for the first time in his life, Robert Miller was exactly where he belonged. Life has a way of answering prayers you didn't know you were making. 3 months into marriage, Robert and Monique had settled into a rhythm that surprised them both with its ease. They woke up together, worked together, came home together, and somehow never got sick of each other's company. Their translation business was thriving, their relationship was solid, and Robert was starting to believe that maybe he was actually good at being married this time. Then Monique started throwing up every morning for a week straight. At first, they blamed it on stress. They were negotiating their biggest contract yet. A multinational pharmaceutical company that needed cultural consulting for drug trials in 12 countries. The pressure was intense, the deadlines were tight, and they'd both been working 16-hour days. "Maybe you should see a doctor," Robert suggested on Thursday morning, finding Monique bent over their bathroom sink looking pale and miserable. "It's just stress," she insisted, rinsing her mouth. "Once we close the Hartman deal, I'll be fine." But Friday morning brought the same scene. And Saturday. By Sunday, Robert was ready to drag her to the emergency room. "I'm making you a doctor's appointment," he said, watching her nibble carefully at dry toast. "Robert, I'm fine. It's probably just a stomach bug. Stomach bugs don't last a week. This one does." "Monique." Robert sat down across from her at their kitchen table. "When was your last period?" The question hung in the air between them. Monique's eyes widened as she did the mental math. Her toast fell from suddenly nerveless fingers. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, oh my God." She stared at him across the table. "Robert, I think I might be pregnant." The words hit Robert like a physical force. Pregnant. They'd talked about children in abstract terms, someday plans, future possibilities. They hadn't talked about children as something that might be happening right now, in their bathroom, requiring immediate decisions and preparations and complete life changes. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "No. Maybe. I don't know." Monique's hands were shaking. "My period is 3 weeks late, but I've been so busy with work I didn't really notice until now." 3 weeks late. Robert's chest tightened with something between panic and excitement. "We should get a test." "We should get a test," Monique agreed. 20 minutes later, they stood in the pharmacy aisle staring at an overwhelming array of pregnancy tests. Pink boxes, blue boxes, digital displays, plus signs, lines, early detection, late detection. Robert had negotiated million-dollar contracts with less anxiety than he felt choosing between brands of pea sticks. "This one," Monique said finally, grabbing a box at random. "Let's just go home." The drive back to their house was silent, except for the sound of Monique's nervous breathing. Robert's mind was racing with implications. A baby. Their baby. His baby. The thought made him dizzy. At home, Monique disappeared into the bathroom with the test, while Robert paced their bedroom like a caged animal. 3 minutes, the box said. 3 minutes to find out if their lives were about to change completely. Those 3 minutes lasted approximately 17 hours. "Robert," Monique called from the bathroom, her voice strange. "Yeah. Can you come here?" Robert found her sitting on the closed toilet seat, staring at a small plastic stick in her hands. Her face was unreadable. "What does it say?" he asked. Instead of answering, she held up the test. 2 bright pink lines stared back at him like tiny accusations. "Pregnant." They looked at each other in silence. Robert's heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his ears. Monique's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "So," she said finally, "that happened." "That happened," Robert agreed. More silence. Robert sat down on the edge of the bathtub, trying to process the information. A baby. His baby. Their baby. The timing was terrible. Their business was just hitting its stride. They'd only been married 3 months. They hadn't had time to adjust to being husband and wife, let alone parents. "How do you feel?" Monique asked quietly. "Terrified," Robert admitted. "You?" "Terrified. Also excited. Also like I might throw up again." She looked down at the test. "This is really happening, isn't it?" "Seems like it." "Robert, I need you to be honest with me. Are you happy about this?" The question caught him off guard. Was he happy? He was scared, overwhelmed, unprepared, completely out of his depth. But underneath all that chaos, something warm and bright was growing in his chest. "Yes," he said, surprising himself. "I'm terrified, but I'm happy. Really happy. Really, really." Robert knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Monique, I love you. I want to build a life with you. And children are part of that life. Maybe the timing isn't perfect, but when is it ever perfect? Never, probably." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I am scared, Robert. I don't know anything about being a mother. I don't know anything about being a father. We'll figure it out together. What if we're terrible at it? What if we're great at it?" Monique laughed through her tears. "You're really not freaking out?" "Oh, I'm definitely freaking out. but I'm freaking out in a good way. Robert kissed her gently. We're going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby, she repeated, like she was testing the words. They spent the rest of the day researching everything they could find about pregnancy, parenting, and what to expect when you're expecting to be completely overwhelmed by tiny humans. They made lists of doctors to call, books to read, things to buy. They calculated due dates and discussed maternity leave and wondered whether their home office could be converted into a nursery. That evening, as they lay in bed with Monique's head on Robert's chest, they talked about the future in concrete terms for the first time. Boy or girl? Monique asked. I don't care as long as it's healthy. That's what everyone says. But secretly, do you have a preference? Robert considered the question. Maybe a girl. A little girl who looks like you and speaks 4 languages and takes no crap from anyone. What if it's a boy? Then a little boy who looks like you and speaks 4 languages and takes no crap from anyone. Monique laughed. You realize this baby is going to be mixed race in Texas. That's going to come with challenges. All children come with challenges. This one will just have parents who understand what it's like to face the world as an outsider. Robert's arms tightened around her. Besides, have you seen how we handle challenges? We're pretty good at it. We are, aren't we? We're going to be great parents, Monique. Maybe not perfect, but great. How can you be so sure? Because we love each other. Because we communicate. Because we're not afraid to admit when we don't know something. Robert pressed a kiss to the top of her head. And because any child lucky enough to be raised by you is going to turn out incredible. Have you ever received news that terrified and thrilled you at the same time? Share in the comments about a moment when your life changed in the best possible way. As they drifted off to sleep, Robert's hand resting protectively on Monique's still flat belly, he realized that for the 3rd time in less than 2 years, his life was about to transform completely. First, Monique had entered his world and taught him how to love again. Then they'd build a business together and learn how to be partners. Now, they were going to be parents. Each change had been terrifying. Each change had been the best thing that ever happened to him. He had a feeling this one would be no different. Sometimes the most important conversations happen in hospital rooms at 3 in the morning. The bleeding started on a Tuesday morning in February, when Monique was 17 weeks pregnant. She'd been feeling good. The morning sickness had finally stopped. Her energy was returning, and they'd just heard their baby's heartbeat at their last doctor's appointment. Robert was in the shower when he heard her scream. He found her in their bedroom, doubled over in pain, blood soaking through her nightgown. Her face was white with terror. Something's wrong, she gasped. Something's really wrong. The drive to the hospital was the longest 15 minutes of Robert's life. He ran red lights and ignored speed limits while Monique curled in the passenger seat, crying and trying not to look at the blood on her clothes. He called her doctor from the car, his voice cracking as he described the situation. Just get her here, Dr. Williams said. We'll be waiting. The emergency room was a blur of wheelchairs and IVs and concerned voices. Robert held Monique's hand while doctors examined her, asked questions, ordered tests. The ultrasound technician's face was carefully neutral as she moved the wand across Monique's belly, searching for the heartbeat they'd heard so clearly just 2 weeks before. The silence in the room was deafening. I am sorry, doctor, Williams said finally, her voice gentle but professional. There's no heartbeat. You've had what we call a missed miscarriage. The baby stopped developing several days ago, but your body didn't recognize the loss immediately. The words hit Robert like a physical blow. No heartbeat. No baby. The future they'd been planning, the nursery they'd started designing, the names they'd been discussing gone. Monique made a sound like a wounded animal. Robert pulled her against his chest, feeling her body shake with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her lungs. What happens now? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. We have options, Dr. Williams explained. We can wait for your body to miscarry naturally, which could take several weeks. We can use medication to help the process along. Or we could do a minor surgical procedure to remove the tissue. Robert felt Monique flinch at the clinical language. Tissue. As if the baby they'd been excited to meet was just medical waste to be disposed of. Can we have some time to decide? He asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. After the doctor left, Robert and Monique sat in the sterile hospital room, holding each other and crying. They didn't talk. What was there to say? All their plans, all their hopes, reduced to medical procedures and difficult choices. Finally, Monique lifted her head from his chest. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her voice was steady. "I want the surgery," she said. I can't. I can't walk around for weeks knowing that our baby is gone, but still inside me. I need it to be over." Robert nodded. "Whatever you want. Whatever you need." The procedure was scheduled for the next morning. Robert spent the night in Monique's hospital room, watching her sleep fitfully under the influence of mild sedatives. He didn't sleep at all. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the ultrasound screen, the searching wand, the silence where their baby's heartbeat should have been. When morning came, he walked beside Monique's gurney as they wheeled her to surgery, kissing her forehead before they made him wait in the family lounge. 2 hours later, Dr. Williams found him there, staring blankly at a magazine he wasn't reading. "The procedure went well," she said, sitting down beside him. "Monique is in recovery. You can see her in about an hour." "Thank you," Robert said automatically. "Mr. Miller, I want you to know that this wasn't anyone's fault. Miscarriages happen in about 15% of pregnancies, usually due to genetic abnormalities that aren't compatible with life. There's nothing either of you did or didn't do to cause this." Robert nodded, but the words fell hollow. Logic didn't ease the ache in his chest where excitement had been living for the past 3 months. When he was allowed back into Monique's room, she was awake but groggy. She reached for his hand immediately. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over." They went home that afternoon to a house that felt different. The baby books they'd been reading were still stacked on the nightstand. The pregnancy pillow Monique had started using was still on their bed. Small reminders of the future that wouldn't happen now. The next few weeks were the hardest of their marriage. Monique threw herself into work with an intensity that worried Robert. She took on new clients, worked 16-hour days, and seemed determined to prove that losing the baby hadn't affected her. Robert recognized the behavior. He'd done the same thing after losing Hannah, burying pain in productivity. But late at night, when she thought he was asleep, he heard her crying. 3 weeks after the miscarriage, Robert found Monique in their home office at midnight, working on a translation project that wasn't due for another month. "Come to bed," he said gently. "I need to finish this. It can wait until morning." "No, it can't." Her voice was sharp with exhaustion and grief. "I need to work." Robert pulled up a chair beside her desk. "Talk to me." "About what?" "About how you're really doing. About what you need. About why you're working yourself to death." Monique's hands stilled on the keyboard. For a moment, Robert thought she might cry. Instead, she said something that broke his heart. "I feel like I failed. Monique, I know what the doctor said. I know it wasn't my fault. But I feel like my body failed at the one thing it was supposed to do. Like I let you down. Let us down." Robert knelt beside her chair, turning her to face him. "You didn't fail. You didn't let anyone down. What happened to us happens to thousands of couples. It's heartbreaking, but it's not failure. Then why does it hurt so much? Because we love that baby. From the moment we saw those 2 pink lines, we loved our child. Grief is the price we pay for love." Tears were streaming down Monique's face now. "I want to be a mother, Robert. I want to hold our baby and teach it Korean lullabies and watch you be a father." "You will be a mother," Robert said fiercely. "Maybe not to this baby, but to another baby when the time is right. This doesn't end our dream of having children. It just delays it. What if it happens again? Then we'll get through it again. Together. What if I can't get pregnant again? Then we'll explore other options. Adoption, surrogacy, whatever it takes." Robert cupped her face in his hands. "Monique, I fell in love with you, not with your ability to carry children. If we never have kids, I'll be disappointed, but I won't love you any less. Really, you are enough, exactly as you are. Children would be a blessing, but you are the miracle I never thought I'd get." That night, they made love for the first time since the miscarriage. It was slow and gentle and full of tears, a way of reconnecting after weeks of careful distance. Afterward, as they held each other in the darkness, Monique asked the question that would define their path forward. "Do you want to try again?" Robert considered his answer carefully. I want whatever you want. If you want to try again, we'll try again. If you want to wait, we'll wait. If you decide you don't want children at all, we'll focus on the incredible life we've already built together. I think I want to try again, Monique said quietly. Not right now, but someday, when it doesn't hurt so much to think about being pregnant. Then someday we'll try again. Have you ever found strength you didn't know you had during your darkest moment? Share in the comments about a time when love helped you survive something you thought would break you. 6 months later, Monique discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with joy tempered by caution, hope balanced by experience. They'd learned that loving someone meant walking through pain together, that marriage wasn't just for the good times. But they'd also learned that they were stronger together than either of them had ever been alone. And that, Robert realized, was the most important lesson any couple could learn. The greatest love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other. They're about imperfect people choosing each other every single day. 2 years after their miscarriage, Robert and Monique stood in the nursery of their Dallas home, watching their 6-month-old daughter sleep in her crib. Lily Grace Miller had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and she'd already learned to respond to lullabies in both English and Korean. She's perfect, Monique whispered, adjusting the blanket around their daughter's sleeping form. She's ours, Robert replied, still amazed by that simple fact. The pregnancy with Lily had been different from their first. They'd been cautious, protective, afraid to hope too much too soon. Every doctor's appointment had been an exercise in controlled anxiety until they heard the heartbeat, saw the movement on the ultrasound, felt the reassuring kicks that meant their baby was thriving. When Lily was born, healthy and loud and absolutely perfect, Robert had cried harder than he had at any point in his adult life. Not from sadness this time, but from overwhelming gratitude for second chances and dreams that do come true, even when you think you've lost them forever. I have something to tell you, Monique said as they left the nursery and headed downstairs to their living room. What kind of something? Robert asked, settling onto the couch and pulling her down beside him. The good kind, I think. Monique reached into her purse and pulled out a familiar-looking plastic stick. I took this test this morning. Robert's heart stopped, and Monique held up the test, showing 2 bright pink lines. Surprise. For a moment, Robert couldn't speak. Pregnant again. Another baby. Lily would have a sibling, a playmate, a partner in crime. Their family was growing. How do you feel about it? He asked when he found his voice. Scared, excited, overwhelmed. Monique smiled. Ready. I feel ready this time. Me too. Robert pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. God, I love you. I love you too, even when you knocked me up twice in 3 years. Hey, that's a team effort. They spent the evening making plans, calculating due dates, discussing how to rearrange their lives to accommodate another child. Their translation business had grown into a full-service cultural consulting firm with offices in Dallas, Houston, and Atlanta. They had 23 employees, contracts with major corporations across the country, and enough success to afford the best of everything for their growing family. But more than that, they had each other. They'd survived loss, overcome prejudice, built something lasting from what had started as an impossible attraction between a lonely millionaire and his cleaning lady who spoke Korean. Do you ever think about how we met? Monique asked later that night, as they lay in bed with her head on his chest. All the time, Robert admitted. What are the odds that you'd answer that phone call in Korean right when I was walking by? That you'd learn the language in the same city where I lost my heart 20 years earlier? That you'd be exactly the person I needed at exactly the moment I was ready to receive you? Maybe it wasn't coincidence. Maybe not. Robert's hand moved to rest on her still flat belly where their second child was growing. Maybe some things are just meant to be. Like us. Definitely us. The next morning brought their usual chaos. Lily waking up hungry and demanding attention, business calls from their East Coast clients, emails about new contracts, and scheduling conflicts. But underneath it all was a quiet contentment that Robert had never thought possible. At 10 o'clock, their housekeeper arrived. Maria was a middle-aged woman from El Salvador who spoke 3 languages and treated Lily like her own granddaughter. She'd been with them for over a year, hired when Monique went back to work after maternity leave. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Miller," Maria said in her careful English. "How is our beautiful girl today?" "Cranky and adorable," Monique replied, handing over a fussy Lily who immediately calmed down in Maria's experienced arms. Watching Maria soothe their daughter, Robert was struck by the symmetry of their lives. Once, Monique had been someone else's household help, invisible and undervalued despite her education and skills. Now she was the boss, the decision-maker, the woman who hired and respected and fairly compensated the people who helped make their lives run smoothly. "What are you thinking about?" Monique asked, noticing his expression. "Full circle," Robert said. "How far we both come." "How far we've come together," she corrected. That afternoon, they had lunch with James, Robert's former business partner, who'd been so opposed to their relationship. Time and success had softened his attitude, and he'd become one of Lily's favorite uncles, bringing elaborate gifts and telling stories that made her laugh. "So when are you two going to make this official?" James asked, bouncing Lily on his knee. "Make what official?" Robert asked. "Another baby. Lily needs a sibling." Robert and Monique exchanged glances across the restaurant table. They hadn't planned to announce the pregnancy yet, but James had always been perceptive about things that mattered. "Funny you should mention that," Monique said, unable to suppress her smile. James's eyes widened. "No way. Really? Really?" Robert confirmed. "Due in October." "This is incredible." James looked genuinely thrilled. "2 kids. You're going to have your hands full." "We're looking forward to it," Monique said. "You know, I owe you both an apology," James said, his tone growing serious. "When you first told me about Monique, I thought you were having a midlife crisis. I thought she was using you, or you were using her, or both. I was completely wrong. You were protecting your friend," Robert said diplomatically. "I was being a prejudiced ass," James corrected. "But watching you two together, seeing what you've built, the business, the marriage, the family, it's obvious that what you have is the real thing. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." "Apology accepted," Monique said graciously. "But you're buying dinner." That evening, as they put Lily to bed and talked about their plans for the future, Robert reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them to this moment. 5 years ago, he'd been a lonely millionaire going through the motions of a successful life. Now he was a husband, a father, a business partner to the woman he loved, and apparently about to become a father of 2. "No regrets?" Monique asked, echoing the question she'd asked on their wedding night. "Just one," Robert said. "What's that?" "I regret that it took us so long to find each other." He pulled her closer. "Think of all the time we wasted being with the wrong people, looking for love in the wrong places. Maybe we needed that time," Monique said thoughtfully. "Maybe we had to become who we were before we could recognize who we were meant to be together." "Maybe you're right." "I'm always right," Monique said, grinning. "You should know that by now." "I'm still learning." As they settled into sleep, Robert's hand resting on Monique's belly and their daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, he realized that this was what happiness actually felt like. Not the temporary high of a business success or the fleeting pleasure of an expensive purchase, but the deep, quiet satisfaction of a life built with intention, shared with someone who truly knew and loved him. Have you ever found exactly what you were looking for in the last place you expected to find it? Tell me in the comments about a moment when life surprised you with perfect timing. Their second child, a son they named David, was born healthy and strong on a crisp October morning. Robert held his son for the first time and felt the same overwhelming gratitude he'd experienced with Lily, multiplied by the knowledge that they'd created this life together, on purpose, with joy instead of fear. "So what's next?" Monique asked from her hospital bed, watching Robert cradle their newborn son. "Next, we go home," Robert said. "We raise our children. We grow our business. We love each other through whatever comes." "Sounds like a plan. The best plan I've ever made." And as Robert looked at his wife, his daughter playing quietly in the corner, and his son sleeping peacefully in his arms, he knew with absolute certainty that every mistake he'd made, every heartbreak he'd endured, every wrong turn he'd taken had been worth it to arrive at this moment. This was what forever looked like. And it was more beautiful than he'd ever dared to imagine. The language of love, it turned out, was fluent in second chances. Hashtag the language of lost love.